The time came to the evening of the second day. Noah has already returned to school, and there is only Muen at home. She quietly came to Roswitha's room to visit her. Roswitha lay in bed with an uncomfortable expression, still showing no signs of waking up. Muen supported her face with both hands, and looked at her mother lying in bed with a worried expression. Suddenly, Roswitha's hand on the quilt moved gently. Then, she opened her eyes gradually. She looked around for a while before realizing that she was lying on the bed in the room. Muen noticed that Roswitha had woken up. She propped herself up on the bed with both hands and looked excitedly at Roswitha. "Mom, you're awake!" Roswitha heard someone calling her. She slowly turned her head and noticed Muen standing by the bed. Seeing that Roswitha had woken up safe and sound, Muen was so excited that tears kept rolling in her eyes. She said to Roswitha with a sobbing voice, "Mom, you've been sleeping all the time. Muen is so worried about you." Roswitha couldn't bear to see her daughter cry. She lifted her hand and wiped away the tears from the corner of Muen's eye. She apologized to her. "Sorry, Muen. I made you worried." She was overjoyed when her mother finally woke up after sleeping for so long. Roswitha wanted to move her body, but she felt very tired. She tried to lift her right hand, but also felt very weak. She looked at her hand, pondering what had happened before. "My body feels drained, and the magic power in the body was unresponsive." She touched her chest again, as if something inside had weakened, causing her physical condition to decline. "Originally, with my Dragon Queen body, I was able to resist the side effects of the backlash of the blood curse. And now that I've become like this, perhaps it's because I used that thing earlier to save that guy." She turned her head to look at Muen. There was no one standing beside her. She looked around the room again and saw no one else either. Only Muen stood by her bedside, holding her hand all the time. Roswitha pondered for a moment, suspecting that Leon had fled without a trace while she was unconscious. Based on his personality, it is estimated that he has already fled by now. The evening sun shone into Roswitha's room, making it appear brighter and no longer as dim as before. So, Roswitha asked Muen how long she had been unconscious. "Muen, how long did Mom sleep?" Muen thought for a moment and then said to her, 2 days." Roswitha frowned slightly. She hadn't realized she had been asleep for so long. Leon must have run a distance by now. However, due to her physical condition, she is unable to personally go out to capture him, and can only send soldiers to bring him back for her. He can't run far in 2 days. It should not be too late to send someone to catch him. Just as she was about to call someone over to the room, a familiar voice came from outside the door. "Muen, how about having fish for dinner tonight?" Leon, dressed in a lightweight outfit, pushed open the door of the room. He crossed his waist with one hand and lifted a big red fish to show to Muen. This fish is almost half its body length. He happily said to her, "I just caught a big fish in the back mountain." Muen cheered excitedly when he saw such a big fish. "Yeah." Roswitha turned her head and found that the person she had just wanted to catch was right here. She felt a little surprised. Leon doesn't seem to have noticed Roswitha yet. He closed his eyes and proudly boasted to Muen about his fishing ability. Haha, Dad is great, right? Muen ran up to Leon and looked up at the big fish that was even taller than her, saying happily, "Yep, Dad is very amazing." Roswitha couldn't say anything, just watched them quietly. It seems that she, like Noah, misunderstood that Leon would abandon them and run away. Leon seemed to feel a pair of eyes staring at him. He opened his eyes, turned his head, and only then did he realize that Roswitha had already woken up. He grabbed the fish with one hand, and the decoration at the end of Roswitha's bed with the other, bending slightly down to look at her. "Oh, you're awake." Roswitha felt somewhat embarrassed about Leon's appearance. She turned her head and whispered, "Why are you here?" Leon shook the big fish in his hand and said to her in a relaxed tone, "Otherwise, where else could I be? I just went to the back mountain to breathe fresh air, and also caught a fish for my dear wife to supplement her nutrition." Upon hearing Leon's words, Roswitha's face blushed slightly. She lowered her head, wanting to bury her face in the blanket. She complained softly to Leon, "Who is your dear?" Muen, standing beside, seemed to understand what Leon was saying. She said helplessly to him, "Dad doesn't feel ashamed." After seeing that Roswitha was okay, Leon turned around. He bent down slightly and showed the fish in his hand to Muen. Muen clenched his hand slightly and excitedly wagged his tail, watching the big fish. He said to her, "Muen, Dad has entrusted you with a glorious task. Can you take this fish to the kitchen?" Upon hearing that Leon was going to hand over the fish to her, Muen immediately agreed. She raised one hand, indicating that she would definitely be able to complete the task. Don't worry, Dad." She dragged a bigger fish with one hand and walked happily towards the kitchen. Leon watched her receding figure and waved goodbye to her. "Oh, by the way, Mom and Dad have something to deal with. You can have dinner first." Muen responded without looking back, and then disappeared at the corner of the corridor. After sending Muen out of the room, Leon returned to Roswitha's room. Due to her doubts about Leon just now, Roswitha didn't dare to look at him directly. When he walked up to her bedside, she looked away from him and whispered, "I thought you would leave daughters and escape while I was unconscious." For Leon, he still remembers what Roswitha did to him. He hasn't retaliated against her yet. So, he won't easily escape like this. He took off his gloves and said to her with a smile, "There are still many things between us that have not been resolved. How could I escape?" "Between us?" Roswitha looked at him with some surprise. She suddenly felt something was wrong. He could feel what Leon was going to do to her next. Leon slowly approached her and gave her a mischievous smile. He leaned down to look at her and mentioned something that happened over a month ago to her. "Do you remember what you did to me when I woke up over a month ago?" Roswitha didn't think about it for a moment. She recalled what she had done to Leon over a month ago. What I did before. Suddenly, she seemed to remember something. But now it's too late. Leon's shadow has already been reflected on her face. She looked at him in surprise. Did you want to? Leon raised his hands with a sinister smile on his face, as if he was going to do something to Roswitha just like what Roswitha did to him a month ago.
Hey! Have you heard about it? SF Light Novel is going to share a new comic. I have already shared a new comic. The name of this comic is The Blonde-Haired Villain. In Girl Overlord novel, also longs for happiness. I have already shared the relevant content of this comic in this video. You can click on this video to learn about the comic story and character information. If you are interested, you can subscribe to my channel and wait for the sharing of new comic.